Welcome to PageProof, the smarter way to review anything and everything. PageProof workflows make sending proofs to teams of reviewers quick and easy. You can design them to let all your reviewers look at the proof at the same time, or move the proof through groups of reviewers proofing in turn. They can involve one or hundreds of reviewers, be as simple or as powerful as you like. Let's deep dive into workflows, what each permission role means, and how you might construct and use them. All of your workflow templates can be found under your main menu. Workflow templates can be set up by work type, by client, or by teams. It's up to you how you'd like to set them up. You can create and share as many workflow templates as you like. Every workflow must have an approver. This person sits in the last step of the workflow and is responsible for mediating all the comments placed by other reviewers and ultimately deciding whether the proof needs changes to be made or is given final approval. For an agency, the approver will be your client who is signing off the work. For a marketing team, the approver is possibly your director of marketing or CEO. You can set a single approver in this last step. However, if they're away, you can replace the approver with someone else. Click Create New Workflow to set up a template and begin by typing the email addresses of those who will be involved, starting with the approver. You can comma separate the email addresses to add multiple addresses at the same time, or start typing to select someone you've sent a proof to before. Click Next and notice how the approver is in the last step of the workflow. Let's call this template our brochure approval workflow. You can name each workflow step if you like. For example, let's call this step Marketing Team. You can add as many steps or groups of reviewers by clicking the plus icon. Firstly, you'll note everyone is given the standard permission role of reviewer. This is the most common permission role. It means they'll be able to see and add comments to the proof when the proof is up to their step. You can have as many reviewers as you like in a workflow step. Simply add them by email address. In this example, because everyone is a standard reviewer, the proof won't wait for anyone. It will travel quickly and efficiently through the steps until it hits the approver in the last step. As soon as you elevate the permission role of a reviewer, the proof will wait for that person to see the proof and push their green button to say they've finished reviewing. Only then will the proof move on to the next step. We indicate there is a flow in place by displaying arrows between the steps. There are two elevated permission roles, mandatory and gatekeeper. Let's discuss mandatory first, as it is the more common elevated permission. Making a reviewer mandatory is treating them like a key stakeholder. They must review the proof. PageProof will wait for each mandatory reviewer in a step to push their green button before moving on. In this workflow, the proof will wait for both Ray and Clark to review the proof. But since Jansen is a regular reviewer, his review isn't essential to the proof's flow. The more mandatory roles you have in your workflow, the longer the proof will take to travel through the workflow. When the proof moves to the next step, the next group of reviewers will be invited by email to review the proof. Imagine a bus travelling from stop to stop and picking up more people along the way. Just because the proof has moved on from one step to the next doesn't mean the people in the first step have lost their red pen to add comments to the proof. There are actions the proof owner and inviters can take to help speed things along, like sending a nudge or skipping a reviewer, and we'll discuss those later in this video. The second elevated permission role is gatekeeper. This role can be very disruptive to the workflow, as gatekeepers have the power to prevent the proof from moving on in the workflow and returning it back to the proof owner with a to-do list for actioning. Because they have such an important decision to make, a question mark will display under their step, as depending on their decision, the next step may never be reached if they decide to return the to-do list. A typical example of when a gatekeeper would be involved is for an agency. They have a creative director that must look at each proof before it goes to the client. This workflow has the gatekeeper in their own step at the beginning. So when the proof arrives at this step, if the gatekeeper doesn't like what they see, they can add comments to the proof, mark them as to-dos, and return the proof to the owner to action the to-do list. If, on the other hand, they do like what they see, they can approve the proof to continue on in the workflow to the client. Another example might be the marketing manager in a step after the marketing team has been asked to leave feedback. The marketing manager, who is the gatekeeper, can then decide if the proof must have changes made to it first before it travels to the legal team. Let's quickly look at what the proofing screen looks like for a gatekeeper. See, the pop-up message lets them know how many reviewers have finished already. They can decide to lock the proof, which will take away the red pens from everyone else while they're making their decision. The green button on the proofing screen will either say Send to-do list if they have marked to-dos for actioning, or Approve and Send on. The approver is always in the last step of the workflow. This person has the final decision. Either a to-do list is returned for action, or the proof is given final sign-off and is approved. Let's quickly look at what the proofing screen looks like for an approver. See, the pop-up message lets them know how many reviewers have finished already. They can decide to lock the proof, which will take away the red pens from everyone else while they make their decision. The green button on the proofing screen will either say Send to-do list if they've marked to-dos for actioning, or Approve. Some important points to note. The workflow always travels from top to bottom. You can change the workflow used in between proof versions. For example, you might want to include only a few reviewers for the first version of the proof, then make sure everyone is involved from the second version onwards. There is one more permission you can assign to anyone in the workflow, the inviter permission. Click the people icon next to a reviewer to give them permission to add other reviewers onto the proof. They can also send reviewers a nudge or skip reviewers if they're unresponsive, which we'll show later on in this video. The inviter role is great for when you know someone in a team, but not all of the team members who need to review the proof. At the bottom of the workflow template is proof owners. These are a list of people who need to own and manage the proof. They will be automatically assigned each time the workflow template is used. If someone in your team needs to be overseeing every single proof, add them as a proof owner. For example, for an organization with an internal studio, the designers in the studio team might all be proof owners on the workflow template. This way, no matter what work is sent out to be proofed, all the designers can be across the proofs and manage the to-do lists and approvals when the work is returned. If you're an agency and setting up workflow templates by client, if a client is looked after by 2 account managers, make sure both account managers are proof owners in the workflow templates for that client. Once you've finished creating your workflow template, decide if you'd like to share that template with others in your team to use when they create proofs. If you wish to give someone edit permission of your original template, set this to on. On your workflow templates dashboard, note you can also duplicate a template. This can be very handy if you want to create a template that is similar to another. Now let's see how to use a workflow template. Drag and drop your file and select the template to use. It's as simple as that. Once a proof is created, it takes a copy of that template to use for that proof only. So if you decide to amend the proof's workflow in any way, it won't affect your original template. This proof in your dashboard inbox is waiting for a new version. When a new proof is dragged and dropped on top, you'll notice that the proof will inherit the same workflow as was used for the previous version, but you can change the workflow if you like. When any proof is created, there's also an option to create a new workflow from scratch. Follow the same process of entering email addresses. And if you like what you've set up for the proof and think you might use the workflow again, give it a name at the bottom of the screen and it'll automatically be saved as a workflow template. Lastly, once a proof is underway, as the proof owner you can manage the proof in the info pane. The green border around a step indicates where the proof is up to. Reviewers will have a dot indicated next to them if they've seen or finished reviewing. Scroll down the workflow and nudge any reviewers who have not finished. In this case, it's Mia. For any reviewer who is mandatory or a gatekeeper, if they're unresponsive and you need the proof to move on in the workflow, select Skip. This sends them an email notification but lets the proof continue on. That person still has a red pen until the approver locks the proof to make their final decision of either sending a to-do list or approving the proof. Also note there is a handy nudge all at the top of the workflow. You can add additional reviewers into the workflow and replace the approver if they're absent. A reviewer with the inviter role can also manage the proof's workflow just like you can. Workflows are just one way that lets you review anything and everything in a smarter way.